This episode is dedicated to our sponsors over on Patreon. Thank you all. In our last episode, having narrowly escaped a trap laid for him by the speaking stone Terranon, Sparrowhawk flew from the... Oopsie, my handwriting sometimes gets in the way.
I've seen your handwriting. That makes sense.
Here,
to me.
look at this. Look at this.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. Yeah, that looks familiar.
I can read it. To me, it's beautiful, to be honest, but it's not always very legible. All right, so anyway, Sparrowhawk flew from the moors of wintry Osgil to the familiar home of his master, Guin the Silent, of Ray Alby, of etc. He has many titles. He signs a closed mouth. We all like him very much. So we're here today to talk about Chapter 8 of A Wizard of Earthsea, and that is called Hunting, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Two chapters ago it was Hunted, and then it was Flight from Flight of a Hawk, I believe it was, and now it's Hunting. The next one's Iffish, and that is the least informative title I could have imagined from her.
Yeah. Should I say?
No,
I mean,
if you know something, don't spoil that.
I don't think it gives anything away for me to give.
To tell me
hint.
what Iffish is.
I'm just saying, if you're a
what is it?
If you like to look at the map a lot,
Oh,
maybe
it's a place.
you know what it is.
It's a place.
Oh.
You're so cheaty. You're so cheaty. All right, let me look. Oh, it is below
sure.
it. Yeah, I see it. It's south in the East Reach. Ooh, isn't Vetch from the East Reach? I think he is.
I don't remember.
I think
You're probably
he is.
correct. You remember those things better than I.
Ooh, that would be exciting. Well, but anyway, that's for next time. But still, like, her chapter titles are like The Dragon of Pendor, The School for Wizards, etc. And
yeah, but we also got Hunter and Hunted.
Yeah, but that's what happened. That's what happened
Or
in these
hunting.
chapters. He's going hunting in this chapter, right?
He must be going to Iffish in the next chapter.
I
don't
suppose so. Jeez, just agree with me. All right, so let me tell you.
I think I've agreed with you a lot in this podcast so far.
Well, I mean, if you don't,
Get over it.
If you don't agree with me, obviously don't agree with me. Let's begin the book.
Please. So
I had to look up the word clinker built.
Oh,
because the first thing that happens in this chapter is that Sparrowhawk leaves Ray Alby and Ogian behind, and he goes in search of his shadow. And he seeks out a boat, and none are sailing because it's almost winter, and the weather's terrible, and the seas are rough. So he ends up having to buy a boat from a man.
Yeah, but I just thought it was cool, though. Before that, he goes to the House of the Sea Guild to
the buttery,
look into it.
Right.
It just makes me think of, like, adventuring and D&D or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, he's like asking people what's up. He's trying to get a boat, trying to get a ship, anything.
Right. None will sail, though. None will sail.
Weather's going to be too bad.
Rough seas, yeah. Bad time of year to be on the sea.
What is it? It's pre-sun return? Or
it's
like
almost,
right before sun return?
Yeah, I have to address that. I was under the mistaken impression that sun return happened in the last chapter, and it's now obvious to me from this chapter that I was just plain wrong. I have no idea. But sun return is coming, as you say. So no one is sailing. So Sparrowhawk has to seek out someone willing to sell a boat, and he does find one, but it's all warped and like leaky, and it's extremely expensive, but he buys it anyway.
Warped and sprung.
Yeah.
Sprung a leak, I assume, just, like you said. Very wholly.
Well, it was actually leaky. Like it wouldn't.
Like you say, leaky,
it wasn't watertight, and the guy was asking a ton of. Well, he wasn't asking for cash, which I thought was interesting. When he said it was like the price was steep or whatnot, I was like, well, what's the price going to be? And then we find out that it's those enchantments, and I'm just like, oh.
Yeah, steep in personal energy and wizarding energy.
I guess. It was like it took him a day and a half or something of like spell casting.
It comes up later in the chapter. I know you hate when I do this, But this is just like a normal thing. If you've read any fantasy book, I think, or most fantasy books, maybe not Harry Potter, they don't waste their energy, but wizards a lot of time drain their energy when they're casting spells. They can't just be casting spells willy-nilly.
They have a FP bar or whatever.
Yeah, or you only have a certain amount of spells you can cast in a day, or, whatever
yeah, but
the
it's
case
a
may
day.
be.
It's a day, right? So he spent 2 days casting spells on this guy and then fixing up the boat, I think.
After he does those spells, he gets his boat, which, like you said, isn't a great boat. He has to put more spells to put this boat right, which it had warped boards and rotten pegs.
Yes. Thank goodness he spent all that time with Petchvery.
Right.
Repairing boats and building boats and enchanting boats.
With tools and incantations. Did we...
Yeah.
I don't really remember... Maybe it was a brief sentence in one of those chapters, but I don't remember us knowing about that before. That they did that at the Wizard Academy.
No, they learned to sail in the... Are you talking about at the school or with Petchvery?
Oh, I'm mixing people up. I'm mixing up Vetch and Petchvery right now.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the etch.
No. They did their
Right.
wizardry sailing at school, but it wasn't with Vetch. It was just him and his class.
Right.
And they made a lot of mistakes and, dunked themselves, and they learned to use the mage wind, but not really to sail.
Petchvery's the fisherman that was on that island he first went to. Correct, the fisherman. Yeah.
Yep.
So he had learned tool craft.
Boat building, essentially.
With Petchvery.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Okay, I found something else interesting in this part, because as he's doing all of this, he's weaving his spells, and he's like, and everybody's like watching him in awe.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Right? Well, I underlined it.
Uh-huh.
It's a short sentence.
Does it have anything to do with the color white?
No.
Yes, it does. Go on.
But later on I do, yes, but before that I put, at this, the women watched.
Yeah.
Watching sighed with envy.
Yeah, do you know why?
No, why?
Because his sailcloth is so pure white. They're envious of how clean his sail is.
Interesting.
Do you know how hard it is to get real white cloth?
Especially in their conditions, I assume, as well.
I assume somebody there is dealing with bleach, right? But I mean, that's what it takes. You have to bleach wool.
Maybe
or
they
mohair,
have bleach, maybe they don't. I have no idea.
It's not impossible. Like, their level of technology certainly could include bleach. We've had bleach for a long time. All right, so what happens after? Well, he sets sail.
He sets sail, and that's a lot of this.
Yeah, you're right.
This next part here.
Certainly. So he sets sail, and he is seeking out his shadow, and he's retracing his steps, essentially, in the directionally speaking. And then he ends up actually standing up in his boat and saying, Shadow, I'm seeking you out. Where are you? Come here, hang out.
He wants to meet the shadow in the sea because, if anything, he thinks, I think as a last-ditch effort, he can at least grab it and, drown them both into the sea, because evil is of earth. There's no evil in the sea. And death is the dry place.
I underlined all of that stuff as well.
Yeah.
You remember how, the dragons didn't want to fight over the sea also? Mm-hmm. I went back to the chapter of Dragon of Pendor looking for why the dragons don't want to fly over the ocean and fight over the ocean. And there it said on page 105, kinship of dragons is with wind and fire. They do not fight willingly over the sea.
And that was it?
That was all it said there. And then there was another mention in the last chapter, the flight of the hawk, or the hawk's flight or whatever, that the old powers didn't want to fly over the sea also. And so I went back looking for that, and that was on page 145. And it said, old powers will not cross over the sea, being bound each to an isle, a certain place, cave or stone, or welling spring.
Ooh, welling spring. That makes me think of something else in this chapter.
Oh, good. We'll get there, I'm sure. So, I wanted to combine all those things in my head. I wanted to kind of understand, why he wants to fight over the sea, and I guess it's just, neutral ground.
Well, and I remember that also made us think of Sabriel and how the dark energies or demons don't cross the water, or don't, they have to put the dark earth over the water.
Isn't Dracula unwilling to cross water also?
It's something like that. If it's not that, it's like he at least has to have like the box from the dirt from the grave or something like that. Like,
I haven't read Dracula, to be completely honest, and I'm not that interested in doing so because, it's kind of old at this point. I think that's one of the rules there as well, though. Like not crossing over water, moving water, I think is a thing. And I believe those rules have been transferred into Dungeons & Dragons for the vampire specifically. But in this case, we're just dealing with a shadow, which is not an old power, and it's not a dragon. But this is the rules for it. Or is it? No, it can't be, can it? Because when he calls the thing, it's there.
It's on the sea. It just doesn't like to go on the sea. Well, but
I guess it's just
it's
neutral
willingly
ground.
Gone across the sea many times.
He doesn't want any
chase
interference,
Ged.
I assume, right?
Okay, so Ged wants to take this thing out over the ocean. He feels, stronger over there? Everything we've just discussed.
Well, he does. He calls it. He calls it, and
yes.
it comes.
Yeah.
I think this is where I got the notion that he was using fear to direct him. I think it was in this area, this section.
He uses both names, or he uses, I am Ged, the Sparrowhawk.
And when it comes, the description's really, really nice. I liked it a lot. It's kind of a man shape. It's a shadow. It doesn't cast a shadow, but it's there hanging over the sea. Like it can basically walk on water. And it just stares at him.
When was this written again? Remind me if you remember.
It was published in 1968.
I've been falling asleep to Lord of the Rings. I've read it before.
I don't know.
The trilogy.
Couldn't tell you.
It's
earlier.
In the 60s as well.
It was written before the 60s, I think.
Yeah, it's like exactly how the ring wraiths are described. Pretty
Oh.
much. They only have shape because of their cloaks, but essentially they're just blackness, just void.
In episode 4, we discussed, influences. Very, very briefly, but you said that everyone has their influences. And yes, that's true. Almost certainly Le Guin had read The Lord of the Rings by now in 1968. So yes, it's very, very likely that she took some influence.
I'm not even necessarily saying that. It just because I've been falling asleep to it. And a lot of things like this are described in this way, but
contemporarily, it would make sense. The Lord of the Rings was hugely popular in the United States in the 60s.
For sure.
So there's the thing, the shadow. He's called it.
Right,
it's showed up. It's hanging on the ocean, just looking at him menacingly, and he's terrified of this thing, but he just puffs the sails up with the mage wind and goes for it, and the thing turns and runs. You mentioned something about the dry place.
Yeah,
so
that's
death is dry.
Yes.
So let me ask you, does that mean that life is therefore wet?
There's something that comes up that I will have underlined that has to do with wet. So the fact that you said that, I'm going to say, yeah, life is wet, blab, and I will point it out when we get there.
Excellent. I'm feeling like this is a chapter of opposites or things in opposition or balanced halves, that kind of thing. And by the way, have you ever seen the show Dead Like Me?
Is that the one with Mandy Patinkin?
I think so, yes.
Is he one of the dead ghosts or whatever they are?
He's the trainer.
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
He trains her how to be a Grim Reaper. Well, her mom, the girl's mom, hated the word moist. And so she would torture her mom by saying moist. 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 Fun. Anyway, sorry.
Wet. Yeah, I'd say
track.
life is wet. Life certainly starts wet.
Right. Okay, so he springs at this thing and it runs. That's where we are, yes?
Right. He hunted, he followed, and fear ran before him. That's page 161.
Fear ran before him. That's what I meant. That was the impression I got, was that he was he's following his fear towards it. Where before he'd been running from his fear, right?
Or is the shadow his fear? But now he's facing his fears.
I think metaphorically both those things are true. Okay, so he chases this thing, and he knows that it's nearby. He can kind of sense it, but he ends up being lured kind of into a trap by the thing. And
all of a sudden it gets super foggy.
So was the fog used against him?
It certainly seemed like it was. That's how it felt.
Do you remember how in chapter 1 or 2 or whatever it was, he used fog to lure some people away from his village, etc.? Well, I think that the same thing happened to him, essentially. Like, the thing was trying to escape him, and it was like, I'm going to use this fog spell that we both know conveniently, and I'm going to lure you onto a sandbar because I want to get the F out of here, and then you'll be trapped on the sandbar. Bye. And it works.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree.
Yeah, it totally worked. And he breaks up his boat on a sandbar. And it's just this little spit of land. I think it was quite wide, though. I think he said it was like a mile.
He said it was a mile, like kind of like a mile by a mile. That's
so
not that big.
Well,
I mean, it is big. Big enough for two people to hang out on and survive.
Did you notice that he didn't get, like, terrified? Like, he didn't become terrified that, like, the thing was going to get him once he wrecked his boat. He was just kind of like, poopy.
I thought that was kind of weird, actually. I didn't quite understand why.
I didn't see it as very natural. Like, I know that if I was in his boots, I would be kind of like, oh, no, I just got put into a really, really weak point. It is mentioned, but, like, I thought that it was kind of weird that he wasn't scared when he wrecked his boat. Maybe it's just that I am afraid of the ocean, right? That may be it as well.
Yeah, but why wouldn't he think that it would be pursuing it? Like, if it was a trap, why was it just to trap him so that it could run away? It did seem
But that was its motivation.
Weird.
That was its motivation.
It obviously was, because it didn't come and get him.
So now it's afraid of him, and he's chasing it. So, like, it's a full role reversal.
Yeah.
So another opposite, right? But on this island, like, I didn't expect him to find anything, and then when he does find that hut in the middle of the night... And, like, I want to say that this is the night of sun return also. Like, is that accurate?
If it's not this night, it's at least when he's there in this shack. Because he's there for at least a few days,
3 days
or a week or however long he's there.
It was 3 days.
So it might be the last day.
Okay, so it's about to happen. It's about to happen.
Yes.
And he does find a hut. And it's poorly constructed. It's not really constructed at all. It's, like, thrown together by ding-dongs. Right.
Driftwood. I mean, that's all that would be there. There's literally nothing.
And branches and, just junk.
I was more surprised that they had anything at all. Like a fire, even food to give him, whatever it was. Like,
well, who are they?
Just anything.
Who are these two people that he finds?
Yeah, this was more interesting. Well...
What did you understand by the end, like, who they were?
He suspected, and by the way it was written, I feel like it was confirmation... that they're like a prince and princess from some...
Well, it's the Karg people that raided Gaunt in the first chapter.
Like those Viking types.
It's the Kargod lands.
It's easier to look at the map.
Yes.
And he suspects they were maybe exiled here, maybe they were, prince and princess, that they didn't want them to take the crown or whatever.
Right.
And it says his suspicions wouldn't be proven correct until some adventure.
Oh.
The quest of the ring of Erith Akbe led him to the Kargad lands and to the tombs of Atuan.
Do you know what the significance of the tombs of Atuan is?
Remind me, no.
That is book 2.
Oh, okay. So that will be the next adventure.
I don't know if it's singular or plural, but it's the title of the next book. I
assumed this was like a tease, at least to the next thing, but also like...
It is plural. The Tombs of Atuan.
To kind of almost just to point out to you, like, when you read when you read that adventure, make sure to reference this part in this book. Like, that's really what it felt like to me. It was kind of strangely heavy-handed.
I'm guessing that she knew... this is a total guess, okay? I'm guessing. Just like, it feels correct to me, but I don't know how I come to these ideas. It's probably just fancy, right?
Yeah, whatever.
But I feel like she'd probably written the second book already, and maybe even the third, and she knew this one was getting published, and she was like, I'm going to go back in there, and I'm going to tip in the title of the second book to better link them, because it's like kind of a magical device. Do you know what I mean? When you can go back and you look at this and you're like, oh my God, she's referring to a previous book.
It's really heavy-handed, though, as far as like a call forward. I'm not going to say a call back, but a call forward. Like,
it was noticeable.
I don't know.
Right? I agree.
Very noticeable.
It was very noticeable. So I felt like she came and put it in there as an afterthought. That's how I felt.
I don't like it as an afterthought.
I don't mind. Like,
I don't mind, but it felt out of place.
Doesn't all the stuff that she does, like, generally please you?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I'm not like
So
PO'd about it.
She's allowed. I think she's allowed every now and then to mess up. But I agree that I noticed it. It pulled me out of the reading, and I consider that kind of a mess up.
But okay, so going back to these two, though, it's a man and a woman. The older man and older woman. The older man.
Yeah, but when she said older, I mean, she was like maybe the 40s or 50s. And I'm like, hey.
Well, he says maybe they'd been here 40 or 50 years, which means they're probably, if they were there maybe when they were kids, they're a little older than that, than maybe in their 60s. And they
I'm
look
like,
probably
hey,
haggard.
That's not that old, guys.
And he's got a white beard and he's looking haggard as hell. Like, come on. He's going to look old at least.
Yeah, well, chill out with
about
this,
it.
Chill out with this ageism stuff, man.
They're going to be super dirty. That's how
they are going to be dirty.
That is how they are described.
I know. I'm kidding anyway.
Here's another thing that I'm not going to go and look at everything I underlined, but Get is referred to as a piece of driftwood a few times in this chapter.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like when he's being like flung around, just this piece, he lay like a log of driftwood in the hut by the fire pit all that day and night. After having been like flung around in the ocean like a piece of driftwood.
If I had to guess, I would say that that's relevant for the reason of going with the flow and like knowing the right path by the ease of the journey. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the Taoist things that we talked about recently. Right?
Okay, so going back to that idea, before he even reached the sandbar, he was in that wave right by the rocks, and he could see a little bit of beach, and he was trying to get to that, but he couldn't like force himself to get there. He kept getting in this wave, being bashed on the rocks and then back. And then
you're talking about after he was trying to swim to the shore?
Trying to swim to the shore. This is before he gets stranded on the sandbar, which I can't remember now. I don't think the beach that he saw was the same as the sandbar. I can't remember. It doesn't matter.
Well, maybe he was intended to find these people, and if he had crashed or been washed ashore anywhere else, he might not have.
Right. Like he was trying to go against what was like the current. He was trying to go against what was happening to him to reach that beach. He could not get there.
Okay, so old man, slightly younger woman, but also old woman. Mm-hmm. And they're haggard and they've been here for a very long time, as is not evident by their skills with architecture.
What were your thoughts though? I was just like, this is super random. Like you said, I wasn't expecting this.
I didn't expect it either. No, not at all. Like it was completely random. We're expected to read the second book in the series, and then we'll understand. We'll see these
back to this.
There will be a reference back in that book to this moment. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, continue.
Well,
we meet these two.
We meet these two, and they don't speak the same language, so they cannot communicate. And so it's just a matter of.
What did he say? He goes Kargog.
Yeah, and it became apparent that was their language, but
that was the only word Ged knew. So that was it.
They share one word between them, and it's a pretty useless word.
Yeah.
So Sparrowhawk spends 3 days there fixing up his boat. I would like to point something out.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so you had mentioned earlier that what was it? The land is evil or whatever. Or, no good comes from the land.
Earth is evil.
It's the source of evil or whatever, and therefore the water is like not right or neutral at the very least.
There's no evil spirits in the water.
So this is a place in the world geographically where the land barely breaks the sea. Mm-hmm. So its influence is probably barely enough for the shadow to use it for its advantage, right?
I suppose.
That's kind of what I was thinking about, like the importance of the sea and land and etc.
It's certainly not a very dry place.
No, it's not death. Didn't he die here though? I feel like he died here in this beginning of this section.
And then became reborn?
No, I think the description, again, it had to do with what you were talking about, dry, death is dry, and etc. But there's a description of him when he's on the beach, like after he's landed safely, where he's like basically going in and out of consciousness. But I think she suggested that the sand under his hands became dry dust.
Yeah, you're right. There was that description.
And I think that's him going back and forth into death. Right? Huh. So he's he's on the border of life and death when he's here. And it's this point that's right between land and sea. Also, it's like this
between
they're barely touching at this point, and the proof of that is in the fact that well exists, right? There's the wellspring, and there's the little tiny bit of land surrounded by ocean, and the barely any of that land is there, but it's like right on the border between the two, and he's right on the border between life and death.
And two people are there surviving and have survived there for a very long time.
And that is what I don't understand the significance of. Like what those two people are doing living there.
And we're told specifically that spring lasted forever.
Well, he enchanted
that
it.
Ged had enchanted. I know, but I think that's still significant.
Well, of course it's significant. But I mean, that's why it did that thing. So what about that piece of metal? When she showed him the dress, and she was very proud of her dress. It was like a matter of pride for her, that dress. She was very proud of it.
Well, children's size dress.
Yes,
yeah.
She's a much grown woman now, and she lives with what does she wear? Like a sack of seal clothing, right? It's like seal skins sewn together.
Yeah, Ged thought it was all goat stuff, and then he realized, oh, it's seal. Everything they have is made of seals.
So I'm sure she didn't have any training in fashion design, so no, and he didn't either. So they're probably wearing like ill-fitted bags of clothing, right? But that dress indicates that she was from a wealthy family, possibly nobility, but at that same time, she gives him that broken piece of metal.
Yes, but it's not significant, I don't think, to this book, maybe the next book, but it was the double arrow of the god brothers of the Kargad Empire, surmounted by a king's crown.
That's what's stitched in pearl on the bodice of the dress.
Yeah. And Ged recognized it.
That would be, in D&D terms, that would be knowledge local or knowledge geography. Possibly knowledge religion, that might come up also. So whatever the check was.
But before she showed him this dress, none of that this part. She also brought him mussels
to eat. Yes.
And Ged ate them as she gave them to him, sea wet and raw.
Okay, is this the wet thing that you were talking about?
Yeah.
What about it?
I don't know. It just stood out to me.
Okay, so oysters, I've heard of people eating raw, but not mussels. I don't know. Like, I don't
know. Just a woman handing someone like sea wet and raw mussels to eat. I don't know. It just has connotations.
Is this dirty? Like, are you thinking
Maybe.
dirty thoughts?
I mean, there's just so many things. I don't know.
Is this old lady flirting with Sparrowhawk?
I guess that part didn't stand out to you then.
I did note that it was an indication that she was much more friendly than he was. Like the old man had bad experiences with adults, and she was too young to have had those experiences and remembered them.
Yeah.
So she's been on this island more of her life because she was younger when she got here, kind of a deal.
Well, did you take it that his guess was correct?
Uh-huh. That he knew who these kids. He knew the origin story of these kids in rough form.
The general backstory.
Yeah, he understood that they were exiled, and whoever exiled them hadn't wanted to kill them.
And we also get it's this place. Like we also get a little history after the fact of this place. Sailors called it Springwater Isle.
Yeah.
The hut's gone. No sign of the two who used to live there, who lived their lives and died alone.
Oh, you know what? They're barely living. Just like a midpoint as well, right? They're right on the border of living as well.
Interesting.
They're living a metaphorical life. Like, I wouldn't call that a life. I wouldn't call that living, right?
They're subsisting.
That would be hanging on until death, right? Pretty much on the border, and that's what life would be like. Maybe. I don't know. I'm grasping at straws. But he has fixed his boat over the course of 3 days. And, okay, you know what?
Right.
What do you think about that piece of metal? Because you have skirted me twice now.
Oh, sorry. I wanted because I was trying to find
it's the same scene with the dress. You just take your time there, your Gab. I call you Jill all the time.
It's on the screen with an exclamation
It is
point.
now. It never has been.
So dark metal, broken jewelry, perhaps the half circle of a broken ring. I honestly just kind of filed it away to remember. I didn't really...
When I was reading that section, I completely just blew right past that piece of metal because it was basically not described, right? And then there was so much detail spent on the dress that, of course, it's like sleight of hand. You pass this one piece of information really nonchalant and immediately follow it up with like great deal of detail about this pearly dress and etc. And I feel like that was a piece of subterfuge. Like, that's the important part. And like, we're not supposed to really pay attention to it right now.
Well, I took it that it was important, but like I said, to like file away for, like I said, to remember for later.
I didn't even notice it until I reread the chapter.
Huh, really?
Yeah, the first time I read the chapter.
But no, I guess I thought it was important enough to remember it.
Okay. All right, so he spent his time there and he's leaving without them, and he enchants the spring and he departs.
He departs Springwater Isle.
Yes.
Actually, I didn't double check to see if that's even on the map. Did you?
No, I didn't look. I think the next section essentially has to do with him tracking his shadow again. And it's like a slow motion car chase. I mean, I think that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an uneventful event, a quiet explosion. All of these things, right?
This is when the sun return thing. He's sailing and he sings the deed of the young king, as he remembered.
So it happened at the sea. Okay, interesting.
The hollows of the waves all were full of darkness, while the crests shone yet with a clear, ruddy reflection of the west. He sang aloud the winter carol as such cantos of the deed of the young king.
So sun return is the longest night of the year.
Right.
So for us, that would be a solstice? That'd be the winter solstice?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So that's why it's called sun return, because it's like, please come back.
He can barely sleep because he has to keep these spells going.
Because the boat is mostly made of magic.
Yeah, and I didn't realize it until at the end of this chapter that the mast is actually his staff.
Yeah.
And it's just like the sail was never real, but
never
like,
real.
Like it's just this hobbled together driftwood staff.
It is really
thing.
hobbled together now because he had like a poorly crafted adze to help him, and then like that's what he had to repair his boat with.
Yeah, he's holding this together by magic willpower.
Yeah,
and he can't sleep because he has to keep it going.
He will
has
eventually
to keep making those checks.
Yeah, exactly.
Those rolls. Here's another piece.
That's a concentration check for you non-D&D plebes.
After this, or during this thing, if he didn't do this, he would scatter and go drifting off as a little flotsam on the waves. It's another like driftwood reference.
Yep, another driftwood reference. Which means, not steering with his will, right?
Right.
To go with the flow completely is to not have any will. You just go forward with the path you're being guided down, essentially. But I think these wizards are supposed to have will. Like they're people, right? They're not.
But that's the point, right?
Like
it's about the balance. You have to go with the flow, but like you said, you also have to have your own will. Like it's this really fine line.
Remember what Genscher said about the more wisdom you have, the more clear the path is.
Right.
Remember that.
And
as
direct.
Well.
And
he said that there was like
clear.
only one choice. It would be that clear that there's only one choice. So
that's where he's at right now.
To your point back in chapter 4, because I've had the luxury of recently editing that episode, you had suggested that possibly that Nemeril didn't have any choice in whether he chose to save Ged's Sparrowhawk's life. To your point, I think that might be true. That he didn't have a choice.
I remember that. I'm excited to hear that part. You're
like, oh, I was right. Oh, well, it feels good.
Not in that way. I really don't remember exactly what was said.
No, I mean, it was
cool.
3 episodes ago or whatever. It was a long time ago. But yeah, so I think that there's choice to be made though. Like, I don't think that they're just intended to float as driftwood on the sea, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think that's accurate.
Where are we going with the rest of this?
Well, he is in hot pursuit. You should rephrase that. He is in slow damn pursuit of his shadow, and that's where we left off. It says that he is following his terror to its source at one point.
What page? That's
at kind of the top third of 173. The full sentence is long. It says, he knew only the torment of dread and the certainty that he must go ahead and do what he had set out to do, hunt down the evil, follow his terror to its source.
So this is right before he gets into this, like, tall cliffs with a mountain
Let's spoil it.
route.
Let's go ahead and spoil it.
Okay.
Because the place that he got himself into, because he didn't really know where he was, is referred to as the Hands.
Right.
It's essentially a fjord. He gets himself into a really narrow fjord where the land is super, super steep and it goes down into the water very, very quickly, which is a kind of an alarming geography. If you know what I mean. It's
I think
very
of Jason
extreme.
And the Argonauts. Have you ever seen Jason and the Argonauts?
I mean, I was
cliffs,
a kid.
The shaking cliffs.
I don't remember.
I love that movie.
This place is super, super narrow. He said it was wide enough for 2 galleons to sit side by side in the water.
You know, it's probably some mythological reference. Sorry, go ahead.
Maybe.
Blab.
Am I? I am Blab. Thank you. So it is. It's a super narrow spot that he finds himself in. He's seeking out his shadow, and it's just getting narrower and narrower. And this land, like, I felt like that was kind of one of those. I felt like the land, as it was described, was one of those things that we were supposed to notice, right? It's like it's getting narrow.
Agree.
It's almost like if you were looking down, like when I was imagining this place in my head, and you're looking at it, it looks like convergence. It looks like all of these lines heading, vertically. But what's that game called? The old arcade game where you had the little guy that you could spin around on a dial, and he would always shoot towards the center. So it always looked like you were on the top of a cone looking down inside of a cone. I don't remember what that game was called, but it existed.
I don't know.
But that's kind of what I'm thinking here. It's like all of these lines pointing at a dot in the center, and he's heading straight to that dot.
To a dead end, essentially.
In art, it's forced perspective. There's a dot somewhere in the distance. We're looking at the forced perspective.
One of the first things you learn in art class.
So he's heading towards this point. And the point, I think your point earlier was that the point is him becoming whole. Mm-hmm. Because this is where he finally tracks down his shadow. They finally have a little war.
Well, the shadow he's lost he's about to turn around out of this thing, and he turns around and the shadow's in the boat.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's on. And they just start fighting.
Yeah.
And he just he knows that wizardry's not going to do anything. No weapon will do anything. He just puts his hands out.
Yeah, he grabbed it. And I don't think it felt good. I believe it was described as being quite shocking and painful.
Yeah, no, it wasn't good for Ged. Again, that kind of made me think of the ring wraiths and stabbing Frodo, and just felt like that sort of a moment to me, like touching this stuff would not be great.
Well, it caused him to pass out, basically.
Yes. And so it ran away again?
Well, he passes out and grabs his staff, and then it takes him a little while to come to, but his boat's like falling apart. So the water touches him.
Right, and he has to immediately start patching it with the spells.
Starts taking his concentration checks again. But there has been a bond made between them.
It forged between them a bond, a link that had no breaking point.
They've made contact, but the thing's gone now, best I can tell. Like,
there was no need to hunt it down, to track it. Neither could it escape. When they had come to the time and place for their last meeting, they would meet. What's going on here? Like, why? So this thing is literally become the hunted. It's just running away now.
If he struggles against it, it works very, very little and it overtakes him. But if he seeks it out, like, it goes in the opposite direction. So when he does something, it does the opposite.
So can he ever truly defeat it then? I mean, if it goes away.
I don't know. I think defeating it might be kind of anti-purpose.
I think that comes up. Let's see. Here it is. Here's the line. He knew now, and the knowledge was hard, that his task had never been to undo what he had done, but to finish what he had begun.
What's the significance of that?
First of all, you can't go back. You can't undo. I mean, I think that's...
You can only make corrections.
That's clear, but he can only finish what he had begun. What he had begun was... I don't know.
I think all of these things are the story of him becoming the man that he became. Like he became a great wizard at one point in his life, right? And I think the whole thing leading up to this point is that path.
How he's getting there.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's an allegory or a metaphor for life. I think that's what's going on here. And like the struggle between darkness and light is the struggle that we all struggle with, because we all think of ourselves as good people, but I'm sure all of us do bad things.
Right.
So we all struggle with this all of our lives. His struggle is just the one we're reading about, so it happens to be really exciting and interesting. And
you can't undo being born. You have to just keep moving forward.
That's correct. And you have to face your fears, and you have to
keep moving.
Yeah, just keep moving. You got to keep moving.
Because that's what the world is doing.
I think that's what this chapter is about. And I think that's pretty much the end of the chapter. I know there's a little bit more, but I mean, that's the basic gist of it. Because it ends on him having had this encounter with his shadow, and it's not resolved exactly, but it's a certainty and a knowledge that he takes with him into the future. And then he finds out where he is. He figures it out. He remembers because he's looked at a lot of charts. And then he finds a small town, and though they're shy, they welcome him in, they feed him, and they give him a place to rest.
Yeah, I think it said that they're awed by his wizard staff, so that was good.
But they spoke the same language too.
Yes.
So that's nice as well. But that's the chapter. So now this was, like I told you, and like one of the reasons that I wanted to delay the recording was because when I read this chapter, I had a really hard time. Like a lot of the symbolism was kind of a mystery to me. I was a little bit baffled, and I knew it would get better if we talked about it. But I also knew that it would get better if I actually thought about it. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to delay the recording. Well, let's finish this chapter, shall we?
Do it.
Do we have anything to add? I mean, I feel like we did the bulk of the work in the actual recording because that's where it was required.
Agreed.
I
don't really have anything else to say to wrap it up because, like you said, I think we did kind of cover it all.
I think we might have done well enough anyway. So the next chapter is called Iffish, and as you were kind enough to point out, it's on the map. So that is the indication. But it does seem like a kind of I didn't know what I was looking at when I saw that chapter.
Because I knew
title.
He was by the Kargad, place,
Lands.
and then those I saw
and then
that
there's the hands
place,
right underneath
and
them.
then I was like, it's got to be right around there, and then I saw it. So, or the other place was Effish.
Yeah, it's in the East Reach. I'm pretty sure that's where Vetch is from. I'm hoping we get a Vetch reunion in the next episode. I think that would be pretty cool.
That would be cool.
I think it's about time because next episode is chapter 9, and there's only 10 chapters in this book. So we have to hit the climax next chapter. Do you have any predictions?
No.
Because now's the time to place your bets, right?
I really
now
have
is the
zero
time.
predictions, but we've already been told he's a great wizard.
Well, we know he's going to become one.
There's going to be other tales, and we know he has other adventures. So we know he's going to succeed, I assume.
Uh-huh. Well, he has to survive. I mean, that part's
But how
obvious.
it all ends or comes to pass, I don't know, because I haven't had any expectations for this whole book. I've just been along for the ride. I'm going with the flow, and willfully reading along the way.
So that's what we all will do. I'm going to get on to read chapter 9, which is Iffish. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Gab, for joining me. It's been a good episode. We will see you in about 9 days' time in the next chapter. Keep reading, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone.